So I've talked a lot of smack about Hands of Time, and so many other people have as well. And until recently, I really hated Hands of Time, but before I decided to make this video, I thought I should probably watch the season again, and now I actually kind of like the season. Don't get me wrong, it definitely isn't one of the best seasons, but I definitely like it more than I did when I watched it last. So with that, let's start this video. So, when I first turned on the first episode of the season, I immediately thought, oh, what have I gotten myself into? This is gonna be so bad. And that was because I remember the season being bad at that point in time. Do you get it? Do you get the joke? Time. Anyway, so yeah, I remember it being bad. Then I saw this very weird opening scene, and let me just play it for you. So, was that weird or is it just me? I don't know, I just found it weird that it opened with the circle, then it showed people outside Bork's Apple store, and then it showing like half of Ninjago before it eventually showed a monastery where Wu was fighting Acronyx. Anyway, I hope I'm not the only one that found it weird. Anyway, speaking of the Acronyx fight, we can just add that to the list of things Wu refused to tell the ninja about. And also speaking of that fight, how good was that? Especially when the ninja showed up and fought Acronyx. Anyway, before that, the ninja were at the museum helping Sandy Sorters, also known as Crux. And I really like how it was foreshadowed at the start of the episode that he was Crux, when he called a picture of Crux handsome. But I'm not sure if he actually knew that he was Crux or not before the season actually came out, or if it was in one of the trailers, or it might have been leaked before the season came out. Anyway, at the museum, the ninja are helping fix it up after the Day of the Departed, and it is also the first time we get to see Cole try to use his hands again, and I like how we get to see Cole struggle with it, and also how he uses Earth Punch. Anyway, after the fight at the monastery, we see that Wu is now sick because he got hit by the Time Punch, and in my opinion, the Time Punch is a very cool concept, and we haven't seen anything like that in Ninjago since then. Anyway, speaking of Wu being sick, it led to a couple of funny moments, and of course it also kickstarted Lloyd into starting to become a master. And speaking of Master Lloyd, or
Temporary Master Lloyd, you mean? In training!
It was cool to see the ninja absolutely take the absolute piss out of him at the start, and also seeing Lloyd trying to be a bit more mature by making a plan. And of course, while that was happening, Cole, Jay, and Kai were making fun of him, and eventually just ended up leaving. And then Lloyd ended up realizing that he needed to stick with the team. Then at the very end of the season, Lloyd officially became Master Lloyd. Overall, I think it was a pretty cool mini character arc for Lloyd, and I guess a little bit for the other ninjas as well. But before we talk more about the finale, we still have the rest of the season to talk about. So the next thing I wanted to touch on was the time blade scenes, and by that I mean when the time blades fell from the sky and hit the ground, then the power of that time blade affected Ninjago for about a minute. I know that's not very a good explanation, but I hope you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, these scenes are really cool, especially the first one, because everyone was so confused and had no idea what was happening. But I do wish we got to see the civilians' reactions to the time blades as well, because they would have been even more confused than the ninjas. I also like how we get to see multiple shots of what the time blades affected, and also what happens right after the time blade stopped using its powers. But in the slow-mo time blade scenes, I did just have one small nitpick, and that is, why didn't Jay just take the time blade? Yeah, that's a nitpick. Anyway, after they eventually got the slow-mo time blade, they go back to the Temple of Air Jitsu, and there they get into a fight with the Hands of Time and the Vermilion. And I thought this episode was really good with all the fights, and if Nia and Kai actually did this to their babysitter, then I really feel bad for the babysitter. Although I really liked this episode, it did have a couple of big things that I really didn't like. Firstly, whenever the ninja defeated someone, they just celebrated even more than they did when they defeated the Overlord in Season 2. Secondly, is that this episode has the worst couple of seconds of animation ever.
The hell is even that?
And speaking of animation, this season I think probably has just the worst animation for the entire series. Like, the background doesn't look the greatest in my opinion, and as I mentioned, some of the movement and the characters aren't the best. Anyway, after that, the ninja find the Hands of Time base, and Kai and Nia find their parents, and Kai fights his dad because he thinks he is evil, but that passes pretty quickly because the Hands of Time capture them and force Kai and Nia to get the reversal blade. And this episode is also pretty great. Gray gives Kai and Nia a blade where if they use their powers on it, they can create a fusion dragon, which is really cool. But we don't get to see it again after this season, but we also don't get to see elemental dragons or Ejitsu ever again after the season as well, except for this short scene in Prime Empire. Anyway, in this episode, Kai and Nia work together to get the reversal blade by Nia using her water power so they can make a rock slide into a water slide. I personally still think that it would have hurt though. And after that, they fight some rock monsters, and then they open the door with the fusion dragon blade. And then they grab the time blade, and then when they go back up to the Hands of Time, they get into a fight, and Gray gets hit by the time punch. And yeah, I just thought this episode was good. So now there are 2 episodes that I really liked, so I have no idea why I originally hated this season. So now we're in the last episode in the season where Kai, Nia, and Wu are on the Hands of Time ships, and they are going to the past because that is where all of this started, didn't it? But before I talk about the finale a bit further, I did want to say I did talk about the finale in this video, but I still want to talk a bit about it here. Anyway, the Hands of Time fight the Elemental Masters, and then Kai and Nia show up and help the Elemental Masters by showing them how to defeat the Vermilion. Then a bit of time passes, so Nia gets the reversal blade and saves Master Wu from the time punch. Then they jump onto the Iron of Doom, and Wu kicks off Kai and Nia with the reversal blade, and Wu is now stuck in time. And can I just say that the cliffhanger that this season ends up with is really good. So now I don't actually hate this season anymore, but it's still arguably one of the worst seasons of the show. So there are still gonna be some bad things about it, like the animation as I mentioned before, and also there were some pretty long, boring conversations in the season, and they were pretty bad and ruined the pacing a little bit. And also, how many times did I have to say brother or sister in this scene? Let's just count, shall we? Yeah, that's quite a lot, isn't it? So now that we have talked about the story, it is now officially time to talk about the characters. And let's start off with the main characters of this season, Kai and Nia. And I'll talk about them at the same time because they are a little bit similar in this season. They are both obsessed with something for the entire season, like how Kai is obsessed with the mark on the Vermilion's helmet, and how Nia is obsessed about a Samurai X suit being stolen. And as I said, they are pretty much obsessed with it for the whole entire middle section of the season. And because of that, there isn't really too much to talk about them, but I still really like them in this season. But the other ninja were almost irrelevant in this season except for Lloyd because he is training to become a master, and Zane goes for his broken arc that he seems to always go through, and with Cole he is trying to get used to him being back to being normal and, you know, not being a ghost, which I guess would probably take some time to get used to, but we really don't get to see too much of it. And with Jay, except for the one episode where he is like the main character, he does absolutely nothing in this season. But someone that kind of is important for this season is Master Wu. At the start of the season, he obviously got hit by the time punch, and he slowly gets sicker and sicker the entire season. But in the last episode, when he gets better, he is really good, and I enjoy him especially when he is fighting the Time Twins in the very end. But easily, my favourite characters of the entire season were Crux and Acronix. They are really interesting characters, and their personalities definitely mesh well with each other. But it is true that I definitely didn't get the time that I deserved in the end, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that wants to see them return. We all thought that at least Crux was returning in Dragon's Rising, but it ended up being a completely different character entirely. But I really hope we do get to see them in the future. So I hope that you might consider giving Hands of Time another go, but if not, give this video a go instead. See you later, be Ninja.